The evening had been unremarkable, the kind of quiet routine that had filled my life since Ellen passed away. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scraping the last of the meatloaf from my plate. It was Ellen's recipe, though no matter how carefully I followed the instructions, it never tasted the same without her touch. I didn't mind leftovers, but this was the third night in a row, and I was starting to think maybe I should cook something new tomorrow. The phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a small lift in my chest. Caitlin, my only daughter, my link to the life Ellen and I had built. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice had that familiar warmth, the kind that always made me feel a little less alone. I leaned back in Ellen's old recliner, the one she used to curl up in with her evening novels. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the news." I didn't mention that dinner was 3-day-old leftovers, or that I'd been staring at Ellen's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour. She worried too much when I gave her the truth. We talked about her business trip to Phoenix. She said Jeremy, her husband, had been busy with investor meetings while she sat through long presentations. She sounded distracted but polite, the way adult children sometimes are when they're rushing between obligations. "Well, Dad, I should probably get going," she said after a few minutes. "Jeremy and I have dinner plans with some potential investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard the familiar click, as if she'd ended the call, and I began to lower the phone from my ear. But then I heard something. Faint rustling, muffled voices. She hadn't hung up completely. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the end button. Jeremy's voice came through first, low but clear enough. And I wasn't nearly as helpless as they believed. I don't remember standing up from the recliner, but suddenly I was walking through the house like a man seeing it for the first time. Only I wasn't seeing walls and furniture. I was seeing history. I was seeing the cost of every board, every nail, every fixture. In the kitchen, my hand trailed along the granite countertop, the one Ellen had picked out after weeks of flipping through magazines, speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light. I'd installed it myself, working late into the night after my regular shifts, because hiring a contractor was out of the question. I remembered the Christmas morning, when 3-year-old Caitlin had taken her first wobbly steps right here, from the refrigerator to Ellen's waiting arms. Ellen had cried with joy, spinning our daughter around while I scrambled for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our house," she whispered. "Our house, the one we built for her." I walked into the living room, and the memories shifted. 25 years of Christmas mornings, birthdays, quiet Sunday afternoons. The burgundy sofa where Caitlin used to curl up with her homework. The coffee table I'd built in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at my feet. That coffee table, like everything else in this house, wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was proof of the sacrifices Ellen and I made to give Caitlin the life we never had. I opened the kitchen drawer where I kept old receipts and paperwork. My fingers found the folder without thinking. Inside were 20 years of financial records, tuition statements from the University of Colorado, $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered the double shifts, the concrete dust in my hair, the way Ellen would massage my shoulders while I calculated how to stretch the budget another semester. "Thomas Massey, you're working yourself to death," and she'd say. "She's smart enough for anything," I'd reply. "She deserves better than we had." Ellen would smile, but she always warned me, don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. I should have listened. There were wedding receipts too, $32,000 for a day I'd told Caitlin we could only afford to spend $5,000 on, maybe $8,000 if we stretched. But she'd cried about wanting her dream wedding, so I worked weekends for 6 months, installing hardwood floors under the table for a contractor friend. During our father-daughter dance, she'd whispered, "Daddy, you're the best father in the world. I'll never forget this." But she had forgotten. She'd also forgotten who co-signed her first car loan, who pulled strings to get her a marketing job after 8 months of unemployment, who paid for the repairs when Jeremy's BMW needed a new transmission. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand brushing the banister I'd carved myself. Caitlin's old bedroom was still painted the Sufton yellow she'd picked for her 16th birthday, still plastered with photos of her high school and college friends. I remembered rocking her through colicky nights in this room, helping with algebra homework at the small white desk I built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom stopped me cold. Ellen's side of the bed was untouched, her reading glasses still folded neatly beside the lamp. Her clothes still hung in the closet, faintly carrying her perfume. I had built those walk-in closets to fit her height exactly, measuring every inch until it was perfect. This was the room where we whispered our dreams for Caitlin's future, where Ellen had taken her last breath holding my hand. In the bottom drawer of the dresser, I found our original house deed, purchased '99. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name alone, now that Ellen was gone. I stood there, the paper in my hand, and felt the anger that had been simmering since that phone call start to harden into resolve. They wanted to take the life Ellen and I had built, every sacrifice, every late night, every missed vacation, and turn it into their down payment on a bolder dream. They thought I was too old, too distracted by grief to notice. But Ellen's voice was still in my head. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I hadn't kept that promise before, but I was going to now. I walked into my home office and opened the desk drawer. There it was, the business card Ellen had insisted I keep after her cancer diagnosis. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. She'd wanted our affairs in order in case the worst happened. Back then, I'd kept it for security. Now, I kept it for war. The card felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of every unspoken promise to Ellen was pressed into the paper. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney, address, phone number, printed in simple black ink. No logo, no frills. The kind of card you keep because you know the man behind it is solid. I stared at it for a long moment before setting it down on the desk and picking up the phone. My hand hovered over the keypad. This wasn't just a call to a lawyer. This was the first move in a game my daughter didn't even know we were playing. When the receptionist answered, her voice was warm but efficient. Law offices of Fisher and Associates. How may I help you? My name is Thomas Massey. I need to speak with Mr. Fisher about a personal property matter. It's urgent. She offered me the first available appointment. The next morning at 9:00 a.m., I took it without hesitation. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Caitlin's voice, the one she used when she thought I wasn't listening. He's a burden. We should strike while he still trusts us completely. By morning, the shock had cooled into something sharper. Purpose. I put on my charcoal gray suit, the one Ellen had sent for her funeral because she'd said it made me look respectable without trying. I arrived 15 minutes early, sat in the parking lot of the modest brick building on Fax Avenue, and went over what I was going to say. Todd Fisher looked exactly as I remembered. Mid-50s, calm eyes, the kind of handshake that said he had dealt with enough family disputes to know when someone was dead serious. "Mr. Thomas," he said, pouring coffee from a small machine in the corner, "I remember you and Ellen coming in a few years ago. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law." He listened without interrupting as I laid it all out. The accidental phone call, the plans for the nursing home, the sale of the house, the casual way they talked about my life as if I weren't part of it. Todd shook his head slightly, but his voice remained measured. "Unfortunately, Mr. Thomas, this scenario is more common than you'd think. Adult children sometimes assume they know what's best for their parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, right? Not legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is in your name alone since your wife's passing?" "That's right. Ellen and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into care, cannot touch your assets without your explicit consent." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by something else. Opportunity. "So, if I wanted to sell it myself, you could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision." He paused, studying me. "May I ask why you're considering that option?" I thought about Caitlin's laugh after calling me a burden, about Jeremy's cold calculation, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. "They think I'm helpless," I said. "They think they can manage me like a piece of property. Maybe it's time I showed them how wrong they are." Todd leaned forward. "Denver's market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling in days, sometimes hours, often for cash offers above asking. If you were serious about selling quickly before your daughter returns from her trip, it's possible. How quickly? With the right buyer, less than a week. That was all I needed to hear. We spent the next hour going over the practicalities, market value estimates, legal requirements, cash buyer networks. Todd said he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I wanted to proceed. The consultation fee is $200, he said as I stood to leave. If you move forward, it will be applied toward my legal fees. I paid in cash, not because I needed to hide it, yet, but because something about handing over crisp bills felt cleaner, more decisive. Walking out into the spring sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The decision was made. My daughter thought she could plan my future. She was about to learn she'd never been in control. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. Caitlin's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. For once, I wasn't scrambling to answer her calls. Let her wonder why her grateful old father was suddenly unavailable. I had work to do. When I got home from Todd Fisher's office, the house didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like inventory. I didn't see my living room as a place where Caitlin had once sat cross-legged doing homework, or where Ellen and I had shared quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and the paper. I saw square footage, bedrooms, 3, bathrooms, 2.5. Total living space, 300 square feet. It wasn't home now. It was an asset, one I was about to liquidate on my terms. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and typed, "Real estate agents, Denver, quick sale cash buyers." The search results popped up instantly, a parade of smiling faces and glowing client testimonials. I wasn't looking for someone to charm me. I was looking for someone who could close fast, without complications, without games. One name kept appearing near the top. Brian Connor. His profile said he specialized in quick sales, average of 18 days from listing to closing, with a large network of cash investors. There was a direct phone number under his photo. I dialed. "Brian Connor, Connor Real Estate. How can I help you?" "My name is Thomas Massey," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can that happen with a cash buyer? With the right property? I've closed in as little as 10 days. Why don't you tell me about your home?" 2-story, built in '99, original owner, well-maintained, Cherry Creek area. I could hear the interest sharpen in his voice. "That's exactly the kind of property my investors are looking for. Would you be available for me to come by this afternoon and do an assessment?" "How soon?" "I could be there at 3 o'clock." I looked at the clock. Just past noon. Perfect. "That works. I'll give you the address." After we hung up, I stood in the center of the kitchen and scanned the space like a buyer might. The spotless counters, the custom cabinetry, the gleam of the hardwood floors I'd installed myself. Ellen would have insisted the place be immaculate for any visitor, and that habit was ingrained in me. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning as though my future depended on it, because it did. I dusted the bay window, straightened the throw pillows, polished the coffee table until it shone. But this wasn't just about making a good impression. It was a way of preparing myself for what I was about to do. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Brian Connor looked exactly like his profile photo. Mid-40s, professional suit, leather portfolio under one arm, and the kind of confident smile that came from years of closing deals. He stepped inside and paused, taking in the entryway. "Wow," he said, "this place is in incredible condition. You weren't kidding about maintenance." "I believe in doing things right the first time," I said, watching him walk through the living room. His eyes went to the crown molding I'd installed, the seamless flow I'd created by removing a load-bearing wall years ago. "This kitchen," he said, running his hand along the granite countertop. "Custom work?" "Every inch. My wife picked the pattern. Said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight." He nodded appreciatively, tapping notes into his tablet. When we finished the tour, he pulled up comparable sales on his screen. Similar homes in this neighborhood have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. Given the condition and custom features, I'd recommend listing at $890,000 to attract serious buyers while still getting top dollar. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I felt a flicker of satisfaction. 900 was exactly the number Caitlin and Jeremy had thrown around in their little scheme. I'd get it, and they wouldn't see a cent. Brian leaned in slightly. "I have an investment group that's been looking for a home just like this. Cash offer, no financing contingencies, no drawn-out inspections. They could close in 10 business days. 10 days. Caitlin and Jeremy were due back from Phoenix in 8. What's the catch? I asked. No catch, he said. They'll do a basic walkthrough to confirm condition. But frankly, your home's in better shape than most new construction I've seen. The only question is, do you want to move forward? I thought about Ellen's voice. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. I thought about Caitlin telling me sweet on the phone, planning to put me in a place with medical staff on hand. Let's do it. Brian's professional mask cracked into a genuine smile. Excellent choice, Mr. Thomas. I'll have the initial contracts ready tomorrow morning. After he left, I stood in the living room, the late afternoon sun spilling through Ellen's bay window. This was the room where our family had grown, where every corner carried a memory. And in less than 2 weeks, it would belong to someone else. I didn't feel sadness. I felt control. For the first time since Ellen's death, and certainly since that overheard call, I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide my future. Now, the clock was ticking, and I was the one winding it. Brian Connor arrived the next morning exactly on time, contracts tucked under one arm and a notary trailing behind him. He carried the same confident air as before, but now there was a spark in his eyes, the look of a man who knew he'd found a gem in a market full of mediocrity. "Morning, Mr. Thomas," he said as he stepped inside. "Mind if we take another full walkthrough? I want to make sure we document every detail for the buyers." "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the hallway. "Let's start where the story begins." We moved slowly, and this time, I let him take in the work without rushing. In the entryway, he ran his fingers along the crown molding I'd cut and fitted myself. "Solid craftsmanship," he murmured. "No gaps at the corners, no filler lines. You don't see that in new builds anymore." I felt a quiet pride stir in my chest. If you're going to do a job, you might as well do it right. In the living room, his eyes immediately went to the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace. Custom work? Every shelf. Match the stain to the floors so it'd feel like part of the room. I didn't mention the nights I'd stayed up past midnight, ending and finishing them, Ellen in the kitchen, making tea to keep me going. When we reached the bay window, he paused. The morning sun poured through the glass, lighting up the room. Beautiful space. I smiled faintly. My wife wanted a reading nook. I built it for her. She used to sit there every afternoon with a book and a cup of tea. Brian nodded respectfully, taking a few photos before moving on. I could tell he wasn't just going through the motions. He genuinely appreciated the care that had gone into the place. In the kitchen, he examined the granite counters again, tracing the gold veining with his fingertips. "This pattern, it's unique." "Ellen picked it," I said, my voice tightening slightly. "It took me 3 weekends to install. Every cut had to be perfect." He crouched to check the cabinetry, pulling out a drawer. "Dovetail joints, solid oak. You could sell these cabinets on their own for a fortune." We moved upstairs. In Caitlin's old room, the soft yellow walls seemed to glow under the light. Brian glanced around, noting the built-in desk beneath the window. "Custom fit? Built it for her 16th birthday. She wanted a space to study where she could see the garden." Down the hall, in the master bedroom, he took in the walk-in closets. "These are unusually well-proportioned. I built them for my wife's height," I said simply. The words caught in my throat, but I didn't let it show. We finished the tour in the basement, where he admired the workshop area I'd kept organized for decades. "No water damage, no mold, solid foundation," he said, tapping the wall. "You maintain this place better than most people half your age." When we came back upstairs, he laid the paperwork on the dining room table. "Mr. Thomas, I've been in real estate for 15 years. I rarely see properties with this level of care, especially from the original owner. It's going to move fast." I didn't doubt him. This wasn't just a house, it was a statement. Every nail, every board, every custom feature was a record of the life Ellen and I had built, the life Caitlin now saw as her future down payment. Brian slid the top page toward me. "Sale price, $890,000, cash purchase, closing in 10 business days." I took the pen without hesitation. My signature flowed across the page as smoothly as if I'd been practicing for this moment my whole life. The notary stamped the documents, her seal pressing the paper with finality. Brian gathered the contracts. "I'll be in touch as soon as we hear from the buyer's attorney, but I expect nothing but green lights. As he left, I walked him to the door. The morning sun streamed through the bay window, casting long shadows across the floor. I looked around the room one more time, taking in the space I'd poured my life into. This was the last time it would be mine in any official sense. But that didn't bother me, because I wasn't losing something. I was taking it away from the people who thought they could take it from me. The next 10 days moved like a freight train, fast, loud, and impossible to stop once it got going. Brian wasn't kidding when he said the buyers were serious. Within 24 hours of my signature, their attorney had sent over preliminary confirmations, proof of funds, proposed closing date, and a minimal inspection schedule. This wasn't going to be a drawn-out back and forth. This was a clean, all-cash deal designed to close before anyone could blink. Day one brought the title search. The company sifted through decades of ownership records and confirmed exactly what Todd Fisher had told me. The property was mine alone, no liens, no disputes, one green checkmark down. Day two was the inspection. The buyer's crew arrived right on time. 3 polite professionals with clipboards and toolkits. I followed them from room to room, answering questions about renovations and repairs. They tested outlets, checked the water pressure, tapped along the foundation walls. "You built this place yourself?" one of them asked, running a hand along the perfectly flush baseboard in the hallway. "Most of it," I said, "and I maintained every inch." The man nodded in approval. "Better craftsmanship than half the new construction I see." They left without finding a single point of contention. That was the second green light. Day 3, Brian called to confirm the buyers were thrilled. They see this as a long-term investment property. No remodeling, no tearing out your work, just light touch-ups and they'll rent it out. "Good," I said. "I didn't build it to be gutted." Day 4 through 6, the rest of the legal machinery spun into place. Settlement statements, closing instructions, wire transfer details. Every document triple-checked by me before I signed. Years of engineering work had made me methodical, and I wasn't about to rush when $890,000 was on the line. By day 7, I started packing the things that mattered. Ellen's jewelry box, our wedding photo, the novel she never finished, my engineering certificates. The essentials of a life well lived. Everything else, furniture, old clothes, the dining table where we had celebrated every holiday, would stay. I didn't want baggage weighing down my next move. Day 8, Brian called with the final words I'd been waiting for. "Everything's on track for closing. We'll meet at the title company on Friday morning. Funds will hit your account the same day." That night, I sat at the kitchen table. The same table where Ellen and I had once calculated how to pay Caitlin's tuition, and stared at the signed contracts. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter had spent months plotting how to turn my home into her windfall. In less than 48 hours, she would learn the house was gone, and the windfall was sitting safely in my account. Friday morning came bright and clear. I dressed in my navy suit, not the funeral suit, not the charcoal from yesterday's meeting, but the one Ellen had bought me for Caitlin's college graduation. Something about it felt right. The title company's office was a neutral, businesslike space. The buyers were represented by a sharp attorney who breezed through the documents with efficiency. Brian handled the process like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mr. Thomas," the attorney said, sliding the final sheet toward me, "this is the deed transfer. Once signed, the property is officially theirs." I took the pen, no hesitation. My signature landed on the page, a line in ink that cut 25 years from my life, and gave me something far more valuable in return. The notary sealed the documents. The attorney smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Thomas. Here's your wire confirmation. $890,000 less closing costs deposited to your account." I stared at the number. More money than I'd ever had in one place. More than Caitlin and Jeremy had dared hope for when they called me a burden. Brian walked me to my truck afterward. "Sometimes a fresh start is the best investment," he said. I couldn't agree more. I drove home through familiar streets, past the elementary school where Caitlin learned to read, the park where Ellen and I used to walk on Sunday mornings. But the sentimentality was gone. I felt liberated. Pulling into the driveway, I looked at the house that was no longer mine. The keys in my pocket felt heavy, but I knew they wouldn't be for long. The new owners would take possession soon. And when Caitlin and Jeremy came back from Phoenix expecting to find their manageable father, they'd find locked doors and a letter they'd never forget. For the first time in years, I was ahead of them. That afternoon, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in my truck, looking at the house like a man staring at an old photograph. It was beautiful, still mine for another few weeks on paper, but in my heart, I'd already moved on. I knew the next step wasn't just leaving. It was making sure Caitlin and Jeremy could never touch what I'd just secured. That meant moving my life and my money somewhere safe. The first thing I did was open my laptop and search for senior-friendly apartment complexes. I didn't want a nursing home, and I didn't want anything too flashy, just something quiet where I could keep to myself and have control over who walked through my door. I found a place in Highlands, a senior community with well-kept grounds, a small golf course, and a community center. Month-to-month leasing, furnished units, no fuss. The kind of place where people minded their own business and still offered a polite good morning in the hallway. When I called, the property manager, Mrs. Chen, answered in a calm, efficient tone. "Yes, Mr. H. Thomas, we have a furnished one-bedroom available. Would you like to schedule a viewing?" "I'd like to move in today," I said. She paused. "We can arrange that if you bring your deposit in cash." "I'll be there in an hour." I loaded my essentials into the truck. Ellen's jewelry box, our wedding photos, important documents, a suitcase of clothes, and a few mementos that meant something only to me. The rest could stay. Every stick of furniture, every plate, every scrap of Caitlin's stored belongings, they'd all be there when the new owners took possession. When I arrived at Sunset Manor Apartments, Mrs. Chen met me in the lobby. The unit was simple, a small living room, kitchenette, bedroom, and bath. No frills, but clean and comfortable. "I'll take it," I said. She drafted the lease while I handed over the deposit and first month's rent. Just under $3,000, cash. I had the keys into my hand within 30 minutes. Driving back to Maple Street that evening, I didn't even park in the driveway. I used the garage opener I still had, pulled inside, and closed the door before anyone could see me. My mission was simple: pack the last of what I needed before moving everything to the new apartment. That night, I slept in my new place for the first time. The bed was unfamiliar, the air smelled faintly of industrial carpet cleaner, and the walls were bare except for Ellen's photo on the nightstand. Still, I felt something I hadn't in months: safety. The next morning, I made coffee in the kitchenette and turned to the next step: banking. If Caitlin and Jeremy thought they could pressure me into signing over anything, they were in for a shock. I needed an institution that valued privacy over convenience. A little online research led me to Colorado Community Bank, a smaller operation that specialized in high-value personal accounts. No big, flashy branches, no endless chain of customer service reps who didn't know your name. I called their private banking division. "This is David Morrison," a steady voice answered. "My name is Thomas Massey. I recently sold my home and need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. There was a short pause. "We'd be very happy to work with you, Mr. Thomas. Could you come in Monday morning at 9 o'clock? "Perfect." The weekend felt different now. I wasn't living in limbo anymore. I was moving forward. I unpacked the essentials, set Ellen's things where they felt right, and even took a short walk around the neighborhood. I found a coffee shop 3 blocks away called Brews and Views. Sarah, the young barista with streaks of purple in her hair, greeted me with a smile and the strongest cup of coffee I'd had in months. "You new around here?" she asked, indeed. "Just moved in," I said, starting fresh. "Well," she said, "this is a good place for that." On Monday morning, I put on my Navy suit again and drove to Colorado Community Bank. David Morrison greeted me in a private office, offered me coffee, and asked about my needs. "I want security," I said simply, "and I want to make sure no one else can touch these funds." He assured me that their premium accounts offered maximum protections, including multiple authentication requirements for transfers. We completed the paperwork, and he initiated the wire transfer from my old bank. By Wednesday afternoon, David called to confirm. "Your funds have cleared, Mr. Thomas. Your account is fully active." Nearly $900,000, mine alone, untouchable. That night, I sat in my small apartment with a cup of coffee and Ellen's picture on the table. The hardest part was done. I was safe, my money was safe, and I was in complete control. The only thing left now was to make sure Caitlin and Jeremy understood exactly how that felt. By Wednesday evening, with the money safe and my new life taking shape, the next phase of my plan came into focus. Selling the house had been the first strike. Now I needed the second, the one that would sting. I wasn't going to be there when Caitlin and Jeremy came back from Phoenix. I didn't want to hear their excuses, see their false concern, or endure the performative outrage. No, I wanted to watch from a distance. I wanted them to think they were walking into my home, only to realize it wasn't theirs to walk into anymore. That meant I needed eyes on the scene. I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, mini surveillance cameras, hidden charger. The results came back fast, dozens of gadgets disguised as everyday objects, all promising high-definition video, Wi-Fi streaming, motion detection. After half an hour of comparison, I found the perfect one, a functional phone charger with a concealed lens. It could plug into the wall by the front door, record in crystal clarity, and stream directly to my phone through an app. Motion activated, 12-hour battery backup in case the power went out. I paid an extra $40 for overnight shipping. Total, almost $140. 2 weeks ago, I would have considered that a splurge. Now, it was just another tool in my plan. With the camera ordered, I turned to the other crucial element, the letter. The note that would explain, in my own hand, exactly why they couldn't get in, and why they'd never see a dime of my money. The first draft was pure anger, sharp words, every sentence a punch. I crumpled it, too raw. The second draft was cold and clipped. I tossed that too. It needed to land differently, personal enough to hurt, dignified enough to be undeniable. By the third draft, I had it. I wrote slowly, in my neat engineer's handwriting Ellen had always admired. Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked. I heard your conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is in my account, where it will stay. I've moved somewhere I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Your belongings have been packed and placed in storage at Denver Moving and Storage on K-Fax Avenue. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Reading it back, I felt the same steady satisfaction as when I'd signed the sale documents. It wasn't vindictive, it was truth. Thursday morning, the FedEx driver handed me the box with my new camera. I set it up in the kitchen first, to test. The video feed on my phone was crisp enough to catch the texture of the countertop, the faint grain of the wood on the cabinets. Audio was sharp. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Satisfied, I drove to Maple Street for what I knew would be the last time. I pulled into the garage using the opener I'd never given Caitlin or Jeremy, parking inside to avoid curious neighbors. The house still smelled faintly of Ellen's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I used on the wood furniture, and something heavier. The weight of years lived within these walls, but there was no time to dwell. I plugged the camera charger into the outlet by the front door, angled it so the lens took in the entryway, the hallway beyond, and, most importantly, the exact spot where I planned to hang the envelope. Through the app, I checked the live feed. Perfect. From my jacket pocket, I pulled the sealed envelope with Caitlin Jeremy written in careful script. I taped it to the inside of the front door, eye level, so it would be the first thing they saw. I walked through the house one last time, touching the mantel where Ellen's photo had stood for 23 years, the banister I'd carved by hand, the bay window I'd built for her to read by. "It's done, sweetheart," I said quietly. "Justice served." Locking the door behind me, I got into the truck and drove back to my apartment. Once inside, I opened the app on my phone again. The live view of the empty front hall filled my screen. Motion detection armed, battery full, connection strong. Friday would be the day. They were due back in the late afternoon, always taking the same route from the airport, always parking in the driveway like they owned the place. I spent that night in my apartment like a man before a big game, everything laid out, every move rehearsed. The letter was in place, the locks had been changed, the camera was ready. All I had to do now was wait. Friday morning came with the same quiet as any other, but my chest carried a slow, steady anticipation. The coffee in my hand tasted better than it had in weeks. The hair by my apartment window felt more comfortable. Even the sunlight seemed sharper. On my phone, the live feed from the camera showed the empty front entry of my former house. The motion detection indicator was green. All it needed was them. I knew their habits too well. Caitlin hated late flights, so they always left Phoenix by noon to beat the traffic. Jeremy was the type who drove exactly at the speed limit. Never faster, never slower. My guess, 5 p.m., give or take 10 minutes. At 5:15 p.m., the motion alert buzzed. My heart jumped, and I tapped the notification. The feed came to life. Jeremy's black SUV rolled into the driveway, glinting in the early evening sun. Caitlin stepped out first, smoothing her hair and stretching from the drive. Jeremy emerged from the driver's side, popping the trunk to haul out 2-wheeled suitcases. They looked relaxed, confident, like people coming home to claim something that was already theirs. I watched Caitlin walk up to the front door, digging in her purse for her keys. She inserted one into the lock, jiggled it. Nothing. Her brow furrowed. She tried again, more forcefully this time. "That's weird," she said, her voice clear through the camera's mic. "My key's not working." Jeremy set the bags down. "Let me try the back door." He disappeared from view. Caitlin kept fiddling with the lock, shaking the knob like she could rattle it into submission. When Jeremy returned, his expression had shifted from mildly annoyed to tense. "Back door's locked too. Garage opener doesn't work either." "Impossible," Caitlin snapped. He doesn't even know any locksmiths." "These are brand new locks," Jeremy said, leaning close to inspect the hardware. "This isn't an accident." Caitlin pulled out her phone, dialing with quick, jerky movements. "I'm calling Dad." I knew exactly which number she was calling. The old landline Dad had disconnected 3 days earlier. She let it ring, confusion creeping into her voice when there was no voicemail. "No answer. It's just dead." Jeremy crossed his arms. "Call his cell." "He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one." Her voice cracked slightly. Jeremy's eyes narrowed. "Then how's he—" He stopped mid-sentence, scanning the doorframe. "What's this?" Caitlin turned and saw the envelope. She pulled it off the door and ripped it open with shaking hands. I leaned forward in my chair, watching through the lens as her eyes darted over my words. At first her face was blank, then confusion, then disbelief. "He sold the house," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Jeremy snatched the letter from her. His eyes moved quickly, his jaw tightening with every line. When he finished, he let out a humorless laugh. $890,000, and he kept it all. That was supposed to be our future. Caitlin's voice rose in pitch, bordering on a shriek. "How could he do this to us?" Jeremy turned on her, his mask slipping. "Your father was smarter than both of us. That's how. You should have handled him better." "My fault? You're the one who said he was a burden." "Well, he was," Jeremy shot back. "But I didn't expect him to outplay us." Caitlin's eyes were wide, desperate. "What do we do now?" Jeremy threw up his hands. "With what money? In case you forgot, I've been out of work for 6 months, and your salary barely covers our car payments." I sat back, letting the sound of their panic wash over me. They were standing in my old living room, surrounded by furniture they thought was theirs, furniture that would be gone in days when the new owners moved in. Caitlin's voice dropped to a low, panicked tone. "Call a lawyer. There has to be something we can do. He can't just—" "He can," Jeremy interrupted. "It was his house, his name on the deed. You told me that yourself." They stood there for a moment, silent except for Caitlin's uneven breathing. Jeremy glanced at the letter again, his eyes narrowing. "Storage on K-Fax Avenue? We'd better get our stuff before we lose that too." Caitlin sank onto the couch, my couch, burying her face in her hands. Jeremy just stared at the letter like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. That was enough for me. I closed the feed. In the silence of my apartment, I poured myself a glass of Ellen's favorite Bordeaux, the bottle we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I raised it toward her photo on the nightstand. "To you, Ellen, justice served." The wine was smooth, full-bodied, and it tasted exactly like victory. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I didn't need to open it to know who it was. I deleted it without reading, powered the phone off, and set it face down on the table. Through the window, the Denver skyline glowed gold in the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were realizing that the burden they had plotted against was no longer theirs to control or to benefit from. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. I wasn't anyone's problem. I was my own man again. I stayed by the window long after the sun had dipped below the Denver skyline. The city lights blinked awake one by one, casting a warm glow over the streets I no longer had to share with anyone's expectations. The apartment was quiet. Not the suffocating quiet of Maple Street after Ellen passed, but a different kind. Lighter, freer, the kind that comes when you know you've put something behind you for good. I took another sip of the Bordeaux. It wasn't just a drink. It was a seal on the last page of a chapter I'd needed to close. The wine had been sitting in our pantry for years, waiting for the right time. Ellen had always said we should save it for something special. I think she would have agreed that this counted. On the nightstand, her photograph caught the lamplight. I picked it up, studying her smile, the same smile that used to greet me when I came in from a long day on the job, the same one she wore when she told me I was too generous for my own good. "You were right, Ellen," I said quietly. "I gave too much, but not anymore." Setting the photo back down, I let my mind wander over the last 2 weeks. It still amazed me how quickly it had all unfolded. From overhearing Caitlin's betrayal, to Todd Fisher's calm assurance, to Brian Connor's confident handshake, to the sound of Caitlin's key failing in the new lock. For years, I had been the man who said yes. The man who paid, who fixed, who covered for other people's mistakes without asking for repayment. It wasn't just habit. It was who I thought I was supposed to be. Husband, father, provider, the person everyone could count on. But there comes a time when being dependable turns into being used, when your generosity becomes someone else's entitlement. The truth was simple. If I had stayed in that house, Caitlin and Jeremy's plan would have worked eventually. Maybe not next week, maybe not even this year, but sooner or later they would have found a way to corner me, to wear me down until I said yes, one too many times. By selling the house, I had done more than protect my money. I had reclaimed my choice, my future. I glanced at the bank folder on my desk. Inside was the confirmation. $890,000 in my private account, under my name alone. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days, not in a nursing home they chose, but in a place I decided. Some might call what I did petty. Maybe it was, but it was also justice. They had plotted to take everything from me while pretending it was for my own good. All I'd done was take away the one thing they wanted most, the security they thought they'd inherit without earning, and in doing so, I'd given them a lesson they'd never forget. The old man they called a burden still had teeth. I finished the wine, savoring the last sip, and rinsed the glass in the small kitchenette sink. The apartment was still unfamiliar, but that would change. A coat of paint here, a new chair there, not much, but enough to make it mine. Outside, the streets were quiet. No one was expecting me to be anywhere. No one was counting on me to bail them out of a mess. For the first time in decades, my time was my own. I didn't know exactly what I'd do next. Maybe take up golf again. Maybe travel somewhere Ellen always wanted to see, but we never made time for. Or maybe just enjoy my coffee each morning, without a single obligation waiting to pull me away. Whatever I chose, it would be my decision. And that was worth more than the money in the bank. I sat back down, looked at Ellen's photo one more time, and smiled. "To you, sweetheart," I said softly. "We built something good together, and I made sure no one could take it from us." The clock on the wall ticked steadily, not counting down to anyone else's plans, but marking the start of mine. Thomas Massey had left the building, and he wasn't coming back. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything about Caitlin and Jeremy. Not from them, they still didn't have my new number, but from Mrs. Patterson, my old neighbor on Maple Street. I'd stopped by the coffee shop one morning when she called out to me from across the sidewalk. "Thomas Massey, you wouldn't believe the scene at your old place." I smiled faintly. I'm guessing it involved my daughter. Her eyes widened. "You heard about that?" She lowered her voice conspiratorially, showed up with a moving truck and found the new owners already there. Kicked them out before they could unload a single box. They were screaming about how it was all a mistake. I nodded. Not a mistake, just not their house anymore. She studied me for a second like she wanted to ask more, then decided against it. Well, whatever you did, it sure was something to see. That was all the update I needed. I didn't care where they went after that, or how they explained it to their friends. My role in their lives was over. The money was still safe, untouched except for the rent and a few small indulgences. Dinners out, a better set of golf clubs, a weekend trip to Estes Park. For the first time in decades, I spent money without the guilt of wondering what bill I'd have to sacrifice for it. Occasionally, I thought about Caitlin. Not with anger anymore, but with a kind of detached clarity. People reveal who they are when they think no one is watching. She had revealed herself that night on the phone, and I couldn't unhear it. Maybe one day she'd realize what she'd lost, maybe not. Either way, I had no obligation to fix it for her. One quiet Sunday morning, I sat on the bench at the park near my apartment. The air was crisp, the sky a sharp blue. A group of kids were playing soccer nearby, their parents laughing on the sidelines. I thought about the life Ellen and I had built, the sacrifices we'd made, and the peace I'd finally claimed for myself. I'd kept my promise to Ellen at last. I was taking care of myself, and if that meant removing the people who couldn't value what I gave, so be it. Pulling out my phone, I glanced at the live feed from the camera in my old house. I hadn't removed it yet. The new owners didn't mind, said they might even keep it for security. The bay window was in frame, sunlight streaming through it. It was empty, quiet, and exactly how I wanted it. I closed the app, pocketed the phone, and stood. My apartment wasn't Maple Street, but it was mine. My life wasn't what it had been with Ellen, but it was my life. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. It's strange how quickly life can shift once you cut the weight holding you down. 2 months ago, my days were slow, quiet, and filled with the kind of loneliness that sneaks in when you've given your best years to other people. I'd thought my future was something to endure, not to shape. Now, I wake up each morning with the quiet satisfaction of a man who knows he owes nothing to anyone, and no one has the power to decide for him. The apartment feels different now. The walls are warmer with the photos I've chosen to hang. Just a few of Ellen and me, no one else. My coffee mug sits on the counter next to a plate with crumbs from a fresh pastry from Brews and Views. I take my time with breakfast. No rush, no schedules. My bank balance is still there, untouched except for living expenses. It's not about the number itself, though I'd be lying if I said the security didn't matter. It's about the control. I choose when and how to use it. I decide where I go, who I see, and how I spend my days. Last week, I booked a short trip to Santa Fe. Ellen always wanted to see the desert in bloom, and though she's gone, I'll take her memory with me. I don't need anyone's permission, and I don't have to justify the cost. Sometimes I wonder if Caitlin and Jeremy still talk about what happened. If they tell themselves a story where they're the victims, blindsided by the stubborn old man who turned on them. Maybe they've moved on, maybe they haven't. It doesn't matter. They'll remember this lesson for the rest of their lives. When you treat someone as a burden, you risk losing everything they were willing to give you. Ellen's voice still comes to me now and then. Not as a warning, but as approval. I think she would have smiled to see me stand my ground, to see me protect what we built from people who didn't value it. This isn't revenge anymore. Revenge was what fueled me at first, yes, but this is freedom. I finish my coffee and set the mug in the sink. Through the window, I can see the road stretching out in the distance, the early sunlight turning the asphalt gold. It looks like possibility. There are things I still want to do, places I still want to see, and for the first time since Ellen passed, I believe I'll actually do them. I lock the door behind me and step into the morning air. The road ahead is open, and I'm walking it on my own terms.